Absolutely. I listen to the news back and forth to work every day.
So you're pretty engaged in it?
Very much.
What did you think of the hearings?
I find it very interesting. I am not sure which way I feel about it yet. I need to have more information on it. I think that they're doing a good job of being thorough, and I am divided kind of how I feel about it.
Are you finding the witnesses credible so far?
I do. I think that they sound sincere.
What do you think or hope the outcome might be here?
I would hope that there is not an impeachment, not necessarily that I'm Trump fan or not, but I think it distracts from what the other issues are going on in the world and takes a lot of energy and money, and I would hope that at the end of the day the president did do the right thing in this matter.
So do you think this impeachment inquiry should be happening at all?
I don't think that it should be.
But you're paying attention.
But I am. I'm very interested in it. I just don't feel that it's necessary at this point. We have so many other issues going on throughout the world and an election coming up.
I'm surprised at how many people we've talked to around here who are very engaged with this process. Why do you think that is?
I think it affects a lot of people, like maybe not just this specific issue, but a lot of issues that have come up in the last 3 years during this presidency are affecting a lot of people every day on the streets.
In what ways would you say?
The refugee issue, there's a lot of people that either have friends that are worried about leaving.
Are you following the impeachment inquiry?
I am. I read the headlines on it and see what's going on. I'm not sure what to make of it yet. I think that he definitely does shady stuff. I definitely don't doubt that at all. It's a question, do they really have enough to go after him?
Some people say this whole thing is a waste of time and money. Do you agree with that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with investigating, behavior, because I would expect the President of the United States to be held to the highest standard.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.